Can you imagine something like that? I can.
Then the former KGB agent floated a Cold War conspiracy theory about U.S. dirty tricks.
There is a theory that Kennedy's assassination was arranged by the United States intelligence services. So if this theory is correct, and that can't be ruled out, then what could be easier in this day and age than using all the technical means at the disposal of the intelligence services, and using those means to organize some attacks, and then pointing the finger at Russia?
Gunshot wound.
It's about a minute and 30 seconds.
Dr. Berkeley told me it's a simple matter, Tom, of a bullet right through the head.
Leading forensics experts say President Kennedy was killed from the front. Who had the power to tell all the media to lie, to shove down our throats the ridiculous story of a lone nut assassin for over 40 years?
In fact, there were no Secret Service people on the ground around Dealey Plaza that afternoon. They were told they were not needed.
The most reliable evidence available proves that the president's body was stolen and mutilated before the autopsy. Kennedy had called on the United Nations to help him to begin destroying the military-industrial complex. The CIA's anti-Castro operatives, led by E. Howard Hunt, were on the scene in Dallas and did much of the shooting. 5 days later, FBI Director Hoover, in this memo, named Mr. George Bush of the Central Intelligence Agency as the leader of the killers. The murder of John Kennedy begat the murders of Malcolm, Martin, and Bobby. 3 million dead in Vietnam, 40 years of Cold War, $10 trillion wasted on the military. A truly dark legacy.
Mankind must put an end to war, or war will put an end to mankind.
During the 3 decades of public service that followed his arrival in our nation's capital, time and again, he would step forward and keep his promise, even when the dark clouds of political crisis gathered over America. After a deluded gunman assassinated President Kennedy, our nation turned to Gerald Ford and a select handful of others to make sense of that madness. And the conspiracy theorists can say what they will, but the Warren Commission report will always have the final definitive say on this tragic matter. Why? Because Jerry Ford put his name on it, and Jerry Ford's word was always good.
Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. No president should fear public scrutiny of his program, for from that scrutiny comes understanding, and from that understanding comes support or opposition, and both are necessary. I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people. For I have complete confidence in the response and dedication of our citizens whenever they are fully informed. I not only could not stifle controversy among your readers, I welcome it. This administration intends to be candid about its errors. For as a wise man once said, an error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. We intend to accept full responsibility for our errors, and we expect you to point them out when we miss them. Without debate, without criticism, no administration and no country can succeed, and no republic can survive. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. And that is why our press was protected by the First Amendment, the only business in America specifically protected by the Constitution, not primarily to amuse and entertain, not to emphasize the trivial and the sentimental, not to simply give the public what it wants, but to inform, to arouse, to reflect, to state our dangers and our opportunities, to indicate our crises and our choices, to lead, mold, educate, and sometimes even anger public opinion. This means greater coverage and analysis of international news, for it is no longer far away and foreign, but close at hand and local. It means greater attention to improved understanding of the news, as well as improved transmission. And it means, finally, that government at all levels must meet its obligation to provide you with the fullest possible information outside the narrowest limits of national security. And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
What really happens behind the padlocked doors of this windowless building? The Tomb of Skull and Bones, Yale's oldest secret society. Its members include some of America's most powerful and privileged elite, all sworn to secrecy. The society includes at least 3 U.S. presidents, Supreme Court justices, and too many senators and CEOs to name. In 2004, Bush versus Kerry was the first all-bonesman presidential election.
You both were members of Skull and Bones, a secret society at Yale. What does that tell us?
Not much, because it's a secret.
Is there a secret handshake? Is there a secret code?
I wish there were something secret I could manifest.
322, a secret number?
There are all kinds of secrets, Tim, but one thing is not a secret. I disagree with this president's direction that he's taking the country. We can do a better job, and I intend to do it.
And we'll be watching. Be safe on the campaign trail. John Kerry, thanks for joining us. And we'll be right back. You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go wild.
I'm sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the web.
Number 322?
First of all, he's not the nominee. And, look, I look forward...
Are you prepared to lose?
No, I'm not going to lose.
No bonesman has ever publicly revealed the truth, but it's believed the 15 juniors are selected each spring based on a mix of family connections and their accomplishments.
The videotape provides a grainy glimpse into what appear to be the initiation rituals of a secret society that's been around since 1832, whose members have gone on to be leaders of Wall Street and the White House, the Senate and the Supreme Court.
They're sort of trying to scare the initiates, make them, disorient them, frighten them.
New York Observer investigative reporter Ron Rosenbaum accompanied a team of Yale students who shot these pictures 9 days ago. Rosenbaum's curiosity about Skull and Bones was permanently piqued when, as a classmate of George W. Bush, he lived right next to the Tomb, the group's heavily fortified home. From their perch, Rosenbaum and his cohorts taped the Tomb's courtyard. What they captured, they say, was initiates, known as neophytes, being forced to kiss a skull, then members performing a mock killing. It may look like your average fraternity nonsense, but Rosenbaum says it's not.
Even though it may seem silly to us, it seems to mean something to them, and you can't argue with the success of Skull and Bones.
True. Famous alums include senators John Kerry and John Chafee, to name two, cabinet secretaries such as Averell Harriman, and 3 presidents, William Taft, George Bush, and George W. Bush, who's been reluctant to talk about Skull and Bones.
Does it still exist? The thing is so secret, I'm not even sure it still exists.
Member of Skull and Bones from college from Bush, were you in the same secret society?
That's all right. Let me answer his question.
Excuse me, what are you running? Whoa, 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 whoa. Is anybody watching? Don't tase me, bro! Don't tase me! I can't do it!
By now, everyone has seen this picture of George Bush and Richard Nixon planning the defense on the Watergate. And probably many people have seen this picture of George Bush standing in front of the Texas School Book Depository, being questioned by police as to what he saw when President Kennedy was assassinated. You'll notice there are various FBI agents, CIA agents, and police officers standing around talking to Bush. Next to Bush, I have laid this picture of Bush and Nixon in the White House. This is a forensic technique that investigators use in order to verify the identity of an unknown person in a picture. You match the skull shape, the hairline, the chin, the nose in the 2 photos, as was done in the famous book Coup d'etat in America by Michael Canfield and A.J. Weberman. This series of photos in the book proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that the actual assassins of John Kennedy were E. Howard Hunt and Frank Sturgis. In the same vein, we're attempting to prove that this is a picture of George Bush standing in front of the Texas School Book Depository before, during, and after the assassination of President Kennedy. You will notice this person is wearing the same type of tie, white shirt, suit, has his hands in his pockets, just like George Bush in the White House picture, is the same height, is the same weight, wearing the same pants, the same style of pants, same shoes in both pictures. This is very strong evidence to suggest that this is a picture of George Bush in front of the Texas School Book Depository during the assassination of President Kennedy. Now, why was Kennedy assassinated? Because Kennedy had just stopped the invasion of Cuba and arrested all the CIA agents who were training for the next invasion of Cuba in New Orleans at Lake Pontchartrain. The Cuban government has issued a book listing all the people, the 150 people from the Bay of Pigs that they suspect were involved in the assassination of President Kennedy. Almost all of those people were photographed in Dallas, Texas during the assassination of President Kennedy. The other reasons why Kennedy was assassinated was because he issued U.S. notes and called for the abolition of the Federal Reserve and he printed these U.S. notes to stop the British bankers and the private banks from destroying the U.S. economy. So George Bush, whose father, Prescott Bush, was on the U.S. Senate Banking Committee, was very interested in maintaining the Federal Reserve and ripping off the United States. President Kennedy wanted to abolish the Federal Reserve and put the U.S. back on the silver standard and the gold standard and producing things of value. So this, we believe, is George Bush. Now, George Bush was asked where he was the day Kennedy was assassinated, and he said, "I cannot remember where I was." But funny thing is, he called the FBI and reported a guy named Parrott as being one of the people who had assassinated President Kennedy just before this picture of him was taken, proving that he was in Dallas, Texas, and was trying to manipulate the investigation of the assassination of President Kennedy.